I had the honor and privilege of attending UC Berkeley for my undergrad education. And when you think of college on any given campus throughout the United States, you may hear this term, the Greek life, and that pertains to the frat and sorority organizations that you find on these various campuses. And you'll have images of them having parties and oftentimes having these toga parties. But Berkeley goes one step further in its connection to Greece. And if you study the history of the campus of Berkeley, you'll understand that the designers had in mind of creating a new Athens, which is the capital of Greek civilization and an important component to Western art, that Berkeley was brought in the spirit or the hopes that it would be a new Athens. And when we think of the Greeks, we think of math, we think of philosophy, we think of knowledge, we think of a learned people. So it's by no accident that the early designers of Berkeley had this hope that the campus of Berkeley would indeed be a new Athens, or be much like it. And so if you find yourself walking on campus like I have had the opportunity last week to do, you will see that the facades and the structures of many of the buildings evoke this classical Greek aesthetic. No building does that more than the Greek theater, a structure that was donated by William Hearst. If you've ever been to Hearst Castle, you'll know a bit about his aesthetics. Now, walking into the Greek theater on campus at Berkeley, you'll be struck by its beauty, its symmetry, its ability to house many people all at once to watch a play like the Greeks did, or to watch a concert, or to gather for a rally before a big football game. But for the Greeks, the theater was more than just entertainment. It was a part of being a Greek citizen. And let's not forget that democracy, right, is a Greek invention. And so the theater itself, the physical theater, was important because people gathered, citizens gathered there to discuss the various ideas and problems that they encountered in governing themselves, and had to come to some kind of resolution and ultimately a vote that would affect their future. But the plays that were there were also connected to the democracy of Greece, and that's because the plays oftentimes were directed at the various issues that were taking place within Greece itself. And so the playwrights wrote their plays knowing full well that the citizens were listening, and the decision makers that were formed part of the government were also in the seats. And so that they wrote with the intention that people would walk away from those plays questioning, thinking, and the hope would be that they would ultimately come to a better educated decision, so that the very democracy that Athens had invented would thrive. And so in many respects, the Greek theater on Berkeley campus is somewhat of a facade. To really kind of understand what Greek theater was like for the Athenians, you'd have to jump on BART and go just a few miles away to the city of Oakland and got off on Fruitville Station. You would find yourself at the site of a tragedy that the Greeks themselves would have felt compelled to write about. Now, if you had been here at Fruitville Station on the early mornings of January 1st, 2009, you would have witnessed Oscar Grant III being pulled from his friends off the BART and onto the station floor, where BART police apprehended him, asked him to sit down, and eventually fatally shot him.
Get off the train now! Put that phone away.
Where you at? Are you still on the train?
We still at Fruitville.
Why can't you tell me what is going on? What is the problem? What did you do? Oh my God.
We're just trying to get home.
What is going on?
And it's incidents like this that we've witnessed over and over the last couple of years that have made us discuss with our family and friends the rights and wrongs and what we should do as a country. And so a director like Ryan Coogler, who was born in Oakland, who attended Sac State, along with Michael B. Jordan, who's the actor who depicts Oscar Grant, they're compelled as artists to do this not to entertain us, but to get us to walk away from that theater, to ask questions like, what would we do? How would we act on a night like that? And what we should do ultimately as a country to remedy situations like this. It is not an easy thing to come to grips with, but we need to as a country. And it's precisely a story like this, an incident like this, how unfortunate it is that Athenian playwrights would have been drawn to. They would have written stories that compelled us to question what we're doing so that we become educated citizens. And so this is why theater, Greek theater, is so important, because it goes hand in hand with democracy. The very space, much like the one we found on Berkeley campus, was developed so people can gather and talk and discuss. But more than that, the actual plays that happened there were written so that we could make better decisions when we return to that very theater to make democratic choices about our future. So you have to imagine on the opening night of a play by a playwright, and let's take for instance Ezekielus, who wrote Prometheus is Bound. When he writes a line like this, "Oh, it is easy for the one who stands outside of the prison wall of pain to exhort and teach the one who suffers," that he was talking about incidents that were happening then and there, and that he was quite sure that people in the audience were people who, when they heard this line, would reflect on the decisions they had made as citizens and part of the governing body of Athens, that they would walk away asking themselves, what have they done? What are they doing currently? And what can they do better in the future to make sure that all citizens of Athens live a better life? And so at the core of this idea, this philosophy here, is what we call humanism. And it's something that the Greeks bring into the world. And so humanism at its core has the word human. And so many of the things that the Greeks do are from the perspective of we as humans. I know it kind of sounds funny, but if you recall back to the Egyptians, and specifically with the shape of the pyramid, we discussed how there were those of us on the bottom, then there were these pharaoh that was in the center of the pyramid, and then we had the sun god on top. That you had this top down, or if you look at the Sumerian votive sculptures with their eyes looking up, that was always this gaze to the celestial world, and we were constantly making our decisions as early civilizations on what we thought the powers above us would be thinking, what they would want us to do. In the Greek times, we have the beginnings of looking at the world through human eyes and making choices for we humans. And so this is why you get philosophy, right? The study of how we organize ourselves and how we think, or geometry or math or science or art for that matter. It's about looking at the world, perceiving the world, and creating or making decisions about that world. And so democracy is an extension of this idea of humanism. And so whether it is a playwright writing a Greek story or a Greek tragedy, or a director creating a movie now, the human perspective is an important thing that the Greeks gave to us and that we're continuing to this day. And so as we begin this unit on the Greek civilization, we need to keep in mind this word humanism, because it infuses everything that the Greeks do, from sculpture and the human body to architecture and creating works that interact with we as humans, to vase painting and other works of art. It's going to be central to the understanding of the Greeks, and it's going to be the core of philosophy that we're going to call the classical world, that is going to go and continue with the Romans well into the Renaissance and even into modern day world.